Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidell.
And I'm Bill Spencer.
On our show tonight, we'll revisit the sinking of the Japanese high school fishing vessel Ehime Maru, some 9 miles off Waikiki almost 12 years ago.
The Ehime Maru, an 800-ton fishing ship with 35 students and teachers on board, was sunk by the USS Greenville, a 6,000-ton nuclear attack submarine. 9 students and teachers were lost, and it was a tragedy we shouldn't forget.
On February 9, 2001, the Greenville, a nuclear attack submarine based at the subbase in Pearl Harbor, surfaced from an emergency ballast blow and struck the Ehime Maru with disastrous results.
The collision resulted in a formal court of inquiry, appointed by Admiral Thomas Fargo, commander of the Pacific Fleet. The members of the court of inquiry, including an admiral from the Japanese Navy, sat for 2 weeks to determine what had happened. Media came from all over the world and reported on the proceedings.
As it appeared, the Greenville was on an exercise that Friday to take 14 distinguished visitor civilian guests, DVs, out for a cruise on a nuclear submarine, an experience most people never get to have, which tells you a lot about the power and influence of the DVs and the way the DV program works.
Because classroom training had been scheduled for the same day, some of the crew was not available, and the submarine was short-handed. Also, it appeared that some of the equipment in the control room was in need of repair and was not functioning that day. But the DVs were important and sent from Washington, so they went out anyway.
The DVs enjoyed an uneventful trip out off Waikiki. After lunch, the up-and-coming commanding officer of the Greenville, Commander Scott Waddle, submerged the submarine to show them an emergency ballast blow maneuver, a maneuver in which the submarine blows its ballast tanks and surfaces so quickly that it literally jumps out of the water. He let them take the controls. They nearly filled the control room, obstructing contact among the Navy personnel charged with running the submarine.
Waddle chose to do this maneuver off Waikiki. He checked for other vessels with sonar and quickly, inadequately, swept the horizon with the periscope. But he missed the Ehime Maru, then bearing down upon them. When the Greenville came up in the emergency ballast blow, it struck the Ehime Maru with tremendous force, cutting the ship in half. It sank immediately.
The students and teachers on the Ehime Maru were thrown into the water, and 9 of them were lost. The survivors were rescued by the Coast Guard, which came to the scene and did heroic work to save them.
The incident was iconic and ironic in view of the strong historical ties between Japan and Hawaii, by virtue of the Japanese immigration to Hawaii, by virtue of Pearl Harbor and the Second World War, and by virtue of the millions of Japanese that come to vacation in Waikiki.
The Court of Inquiry examined the officers and sailors who manned the control room that day, as well as the officers ashore who had ordered the Greenville to make the trip. Although the 14 DVs were in the control room at the time of the collision, not one of them was called to testify. This could only be part of an effort to protect them and the DV program.
Fire control technician, FCTOW of the watch, who was responsible for plotting all contacts. And what happened here is he had a contact, that is another vessel, at approximately 2,000 yards, give or take, and that's roughly a nautical mile and very close at a speed of 11 knots, which is the speed the Ehime Maru was making. And he did not advise the captain that he had that contact. Furthermore, he reset the contact to 9,000 yards without telling the captain that he had done so. The result, it was off the chart and no one was tracking it. When they were doing their maneuvers for the benefit of the civilians, that is, the entire trip was ostensibly for the benefit of the civilians, they came up in preparation for the main ballast blow. They came up to 150 feet, which was in preparation for going to periscope depth. And there was testimony from Admiral Griffiths that they did not spend enough time at 150 feet to do what he thought was appropriate, namely 2 full sonar sweeps at that depth. Furthermore, when they did arrive at periscope depth, he had a reconstructed timeline, Admiral Griffiths. It was impressive. It determined that there were only 80 seconds spent at periscope depth, and that, he said, was not enough. It required, in his view, at least 3.5 minutes of periscope sweep to determine whether there were other vessels there. So what he portrayed was a submarine which was hurrying, a submarine which was concerned about making its appointed rendezvous with the tugboat at 1400 hours and which was late because there had been some additional discussion in the mess deck following lunch that perhaps ate into their time plan. This is coming to an end rapidly, but it was not as rapid as we might have expected. First thing is that they gave testimonial immunity to FT1 Seacrest, and he testified yesterday. And then we expected, and statements, unsworn statements, were submitted by both Mr. Cohen and the executive officer, Commander Pfeiffer. And we thought, actually, that Commander Waddle would do the same this morning in closing his part of the investigation, and he would have been the final part. However, in a surprise move, instead of providing an unsworn statement, he elected to testify under oath. Everyone was surprised. He made a short and apologetic statement admitting the command responsibility for the accident. Took 5 or 10 minutes, and I guess he might have expected that the court would have accepted that and not done hot questioning. However, if he expected that, it was a miscalculation. They are asking him tough questions. They have the demeanor of people who don't believe his answers. They are not letting him off the hook on anything.
By making testimony after the refusal of immunity, doesn't he open himself to charges that the admirals have already made clear that he is vulnerable to?
Absolutely, Ray. It was a risky move. I suppose one could say it was a heroic move. Instead of submitting an unsworn statement, which could not be cross-examined, he elected to open himself up for cross-examination. So the statement and the cross-examination are admissible against him in any criminal proceeding to follow.
J. Fidell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ray.
When the court of inquiry was done, it found that there was responsibility on the part of Commander Scott Waddle and left it to the convening authority, Admiral Fargo, to decide whether Waddle should be court-martialed for violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The press, including the New York Times, was nearly universal in calling for a court-martial to clear the air.
Admiral Fargo declined to convene a court-martial. Instead, he conducted non-judicial punishment, otherwise known as a captain's mast, and punished Waddle with what amount to a slap on the wrist. His naval career at an end, Waddle was permitted to retire with full pay and benefits, and he did that a few months later.
After he retired, Waddle went on speaking tours and earned substantial sums speaking about the incident. He also wrote 2 books characterizing himself as a victim rather than the person responsible. Some say this mischaracterization takes hubris to new levels.
Well, good morning, folks. It's an honor to be here to not only stand before you, but also to reach an audience by satellite, globally transmitting this program. The topic of my discussion today is called Failure is Not Final. My name is Scott Waddle. I'm a retired Navy submarine commander. I served in the United States Navy for a period of 20 years. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever envision as a young man that my career would ultimately take me under the water, where over a course of a 20-year period of time, I would spend 12 years underwater. That's a long time. That's a long time to be away from your family, a long time to be away from your friends, and it's an incredible challenge. But what I like to do today is to share a message with you that I believe is truly important, not only in the workplace and our personal lives and interactions that we have with strangers, but it's the importance of knowing that the values that you learn from life's experiences can truly benefit you. So this subject, Failure Not Final, is what I talk about full-time today.
The incident and Waddle's handling of it, his testimony at the court of inquiry, his comments blaming the crew for the collision, and his failure to give the families of the victims a prompt and unconditional apology strained U.S.-Japan relations. Despite subsequent Navy apologies and reparations, the Japanese have never forgotten their sadness and anger about it.
They were just teenagers, the 4 students who hoped for careers at sea. Today, they'd be approaching 30, perhaps skippering their own vessels. The loss, the pain, the grief is still etched on the faces of family members. A delegation from Ehime Maru home port Uwajima City offered prayers for the departed and solace for those remaining. In the aftermath of the terrible tragedy, the vessel was raised and the bodies of 8 of the 9 missing were recovered. The Ehime Maru now lies scuttled in deep water. A Navy court found USS Greenville Captain Scott Waddle guilty of dereliction of duty. He retired from the Navy shortly after and has apologized to the families. But for some, apologies will never be enough.
I cannot hate Scott Waddle as a person, but I hate what he did. It is difficult to forgive.
The body of Mizuguchi's son, Takeshi, was never found.
The sinking of the Ehime Maru is symbolized in a memorial in Kaka'ako Waterfront Park, overlooking an area where the wreck passed on the way to its final resting place off Kalailoa. This touching memorial tells the story and lists those who were lost, memorializing this tragic event.
It's only fitting that now, 12 years later, we take another look at what happened on February 9, 2001, just 6 months before 9/11. That we try to make sense of it and try to find some useful lessons for the future and the sea changes to show us where we're going.
During the inquiry, an article was published in the New York Magazine called The American Raj, referring to those of semi-royalty in India. It spoke of the Navy at Pearl Harbor, men in dress whites with enormous power, in their own kind of semi-royalty.
The Distinguished Visitor Program was considered the jewel in the Navy's crown, and it was also the elephant in the courtroom. Charles Gittins, individual counsel for Waddle, used it as a bargaining chip to avoid a court-martial for his client. Nobody, neither the members of the Court of Inquiry, nor Admiral Fargo, the convening authority, nor the Navy witnesses, for that matter, wanted to put the DV program on trial.
As it worked out, both Waddle and the DV program survived the incident in the Court of Inquiry. The program has continued, and trips like the one on the Greenville still go on, perhaps with more caution and less fanfare. After all, DVs are an important part of the Navy's efforts in Congress. The incident was a turning point, hopefully never to be repeated. It reminds us, of course, that these Navy instrumentalities are not play toys or to be taken lightly. They are lethal and dangerous machines built to do destruction in times of war and should be treated with the utmost caution and respect in times of peace.
The tragedy of the Ehime Maru has been eclipsed by many other dramatic events over the past 12 years. But we should all remember what happened, and we should all be mindful of the need for vigilance about the power and accountability of our military officers and their enormous influence on our political community.
The headlines about David Petraeus are relevant and help us connect the dots. Recent articles by Lucian Truscott in the New York Times, a phony hero for a phony war, and Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal, An Epidemic of Egomania, point out that our senior military officers have become more concerned with uniforms, ribbons, bragging rights, and PR appearances than their job of leadership.
It also reminds us that we cannot afford to elevate our senior officers to royalty as depicted in the American Raj. They should be dedicated first to leadership and the successful performance of their mission and their orders. They should be closer to the fleet than the O Club, the Press Corps, or the DVs. They must separate public relations and the DV program from those leadership responsibilities, making sure that the mission is accomplished before the DVs are put at the helm.
To revisit the events that took place in the spring of 2001, when hundreds of press camped out on the lawn of the Personnel Services building outside Makalapa Gate at Pearl Harbor, we contacted Daryl Huff, who at the time was a TV news reporter covering the story.
The whole Ehime Maru incident sort of sticks in my mind, and I think it probably sticks in yours too. What are your recollections in general? What kind of an experience was it to cover this story?
Well, it was a great story. It had all these elements. It had loss of innocent lives. It had the arrogance of power. It had the incredible might of the United States Navy. It had the conflict between an arrogant, cocky commander. A commander is required in both the lore and the law of the submarine to listen to an enlisted person who has something that needs to be brought to your attention. There may have been one of those preliminary shout-outs like, do we have clear to blow or whatever, at which point, at that moment, he's supposed to go, sir, hold on, please. And he didn't. And he testified that he was not fully aware of the surface situation. So at that point, that submarine started up as fast as a bubble goes up underwater and just blasted that little boat into smithereens. And the captain, commander, was blaming that petty officer. Then it took really days and days of testimony about the way the commander was with people and with his crew to actually get into the psychology of a petty officer sitting there, and is he going to embarrass the commander in front of a bunch of civilians? It was about the civilians, it was about embarrassment, it was about arrogance, and it was about him not having confidence that there wouldn't be ramifications from the commander if he said something under those circumstances. So therefore it comes back to why it was the commander's fault. My impression was always that, because we've seen other cases where a big ship will run aground or they'll crash into one another, or, and the captain's asleep in his cabin, but he still gets, basically, that's the end of your career. And I always thought that was kind of harsh, that, you're the captain, you're asleep in your cabin, and it's, your XO screws up, it's still your career. And that is understood throughout the military. It doesn't matter if it's your fault, it's your fault. We are going to elevate you to the highest level of power. We're going to put you in control of a weapon that has the capability of wiping most small nations off of the earth. In return for that, you are going to live to a higher standard than anybody else in the country, because you're getting more power than anyone else in the country. The power attracts them. The power can destroy them. And so that's the deal. It's a different set of justice that the rest of us are used to dealing with.
It sort of calls this dichotomy between the meritocracy that will select the best and the brightest and the ones who are able to handle that power, and the politics. And politics is not necessarily limited to Congress. Politics is including the DV program in general. It's including the people in the Navy who befriend a certain officer and give him a road to the top, which is exactly what was going on with Waddle.
Right. That's why I think at some point something was going to happen. I mean, he was going to take another FAM tour. Something was going to happen, and it's a shame it happened the way it happened. It was a terrible tragedy for those young people. But God has his ways of setting us straight.
Yeah. Well, it was historic for sure.
Yeah.
Darryl, to be there with you, to talk with you now about it, it was a historic event, and I feel that more strongly than I did at the time, but there you have it.
I do too. I look back and I go, at the time it was a lot of hard work. Day to day, trying to understand, trying to learn all that new stuff. It's only looking back, I think you can put into context, what happened. I think it probably sent a message through the Navy and to the rest of the world that we do care about the loss of innocent life. And while we may not demand a pound of flesh in equal measure, we do care, and we do what we can to prevent it. Waddle made his own bad luck. We have to agree about that. Right? If he had done it right, it wouldn't have happened.
And now let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech's 4 to 5 p.m. drive time radio series on KGU 760 AM continues this week. Tune in to 760 AM for great shows every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Raise your awareness on tech, energy, Asia, and more on ThinkTech Radio.
On January 24th, the Hawaii Venture Capital Association and ThinkTech will present the annual Entrepreneur of the Year and the Deal of the Year awards at a luncheon program at the Plaza Club. Sign up for these programs at hvca.org. And here's a short movie by and about Jasper Wang's Powwow and the remarkable artwork its artists have created on the walls of Kaka'ako. We're sure you'll enjoy both the movie and the art.
What is powwow? Oh my God.
Powwow is a gathering. It's a gathering of artists, of people. It's basically a project to bring people together to celebrate art, music, and culture. It's about beautifying a neighborhood, about changing a neighborhood through art. That's what we're trying to do, is just paint a whole neighborhood and see what happens.
Originally, our plan was to grow out of the gallery space and get a few walls here and there. That obviously didn't happen, and we instead took over the whole community.
All the artists come from all over the world. Guys coming from Australia, from Germany, France, all over America, Japan, Hong Kong. We were just trying to pull guys from every corner of the globe.
The last year, Powwow 2011, I came and took portraits of people at the opening. I came back in Powwow 2012 to show what I've done last year. The title of this series is called They All Look the Same to Me. Kind of like the negative remarks I used to get when I was a kid. People say, oh, those Asians, they all look the same to me. And it always kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And to me, I think that's almost like a positive. Like, yeah, I guess we all are pretty much the same. The only thing different is the color of our skin.
I've been inspired by like all sorts of things, like diagrammatic drawings that you see in architecture, and really like seeing like how a face or even a body or a figure are just broken down into like simple geometric forms. I don't want somebody to show me a mirror of what I see already. I always like to tweak stuff, like enhance it, like stretching and pulling it, you know what I mean? And it's like you get a piece of dough, you're making bread or pizza. That's kind of what it's like to do a painting, and you do the same thing, you know, you're just tweaking it, stretching and pulling it.
I think public art in a neighborhood, if it's done well and if it's done with meaning, it's amazing. And it's really a blessing to even be able to have a neighborhood that's willing to let us do that. And I think there's many local artists as well that are inspired by the work that's been done here.
Being involved in Powwow actually kick-started this year for me. In 2012, I told myself, I don't want to be one of those people watching things happen. Art has been the longest passion that I had, so I just wanted to reconnect and kind of stay more busy, do more projects like this. It's hard to think up of a concept that'll work, with the public. So I sat back and, hey, I saw this big-ass hipster cat. Saw some Kanye shades with those vents, and I wanted to do a big hipster god that all the hipsters could pass by and be stoked to see. I wanted everybody to laugh, pretty much.
I'm originally from down the south coast of New South Wales. At the age of 13, ended up moving to the city. Got into the graffiti, like running around tagging, getting into trains. I got sick of that, wanted to look for a new direction and started to sort of focus more on making murals and that sort of stuff. Like, I'm not really religious in any way, but my artwork is almost like has a religious aspect to it. It gives me self-satisfaction. If I didn't do it, I'd probably be doing a hell of a lot of other bad things. And we sort of do it because we love doing it, and we'll be doing it no matter what. But if the community enjoy it and get something from it, that's just equally as good.
I constantly am seeing people out walking around, looking at everything that's been done in this neighborhood, and it's brightened this neighborhood so much.
Working public space, I think there's so much grey and horrible drab buildings in a lot of cities around the world that it's nice to have a bit of colour splashed around the place. So should be more of it, I think.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech, but first we want to thank our underwriters.
Thanks to the Schuyler Family Foundation, which supports a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates MECO on Maui and HELCO on the Big Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive at BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company, and CEO of CVI Polymers, a tech company in Hawaii.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle & Cook, Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly known as the Gas Company, providing cleaner burning gas products to the people of Hawaii. Proponent of the new initiative to provide the alternative of liquid natural gas, a Hawaii company that's building Hawaii's energy future.
Okay, Bill, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Bill does. For additional times, check out OC16.tv.
You bet, Jay. For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a sponsor or a volunteer and help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Jay Fidell. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode.
I'm Bill Spencer. Aloha, everyone.